So, this is your very first video lecture. And this video lecture is literally about how to take notes from a video lecture. So, just some real tips and some guidelines and procedures, some things you should actually look out for. In addition to learning how to take notes from an actual video lecture, we're also going to be discussing about what happens the next day in class. Remember, in the flipping the classroom, taking the video lecture, doing the notes at home is just the first step. The next step is the next day in class, how we achieve mastery of the concept that we're looking at. And then lastly, we're going to talk about Collabo roles and then Paideia seminars. So, let's get right into it. So, whenever you are assigned a video lecture and you're sitting down and you have your quiet space, you have your headphones, you want to make sure the first thing you do is that you make sure you have the proper title. Now, typically in video lectures, the titles are either going to be in red, black, or blue ink. So you always want to, in your date book, put the title at the top of the page. Then also you want to put the date that you took the lectures. That way you kind of have an idea of how far they were back or when you actually did them. Another rule of thumb is to actually also write down the date the video was actually created. A lot of lecture videos have been done in the past. Therefore, you may have new information. The teacher may want to give you new information, or maybe the information is outdated. Now, when you actually take notes, you do what's called a WISC. WISC stands for watch, summarize, and question. Now, we're going to use the old Cornell Notes page format method for taking notes, except it's going to be a little different. So you're going to do your page exactly how you do Cornell Notes. In the big square box is going to be where you watch, where you take your notes. The Q box, typically in Cornell, is where you try to create questions. While I want you to still do that, I also want you to write questions that you have for the teacher, that you can ask the teacher the next day. Also, what you want to do is you also want to try to assess the teacher's knowledge of the teacher's own material. Remember, the next day, the teacher is going to literally model for you how to do a concept, how to master a concept, how to apply the knowledge that you learned from the lecture video. So you want to come up with some questions that will kind of test the teacher. And you write all those questions in the Q column. Lastly, when you're done with all of the notes, you've gotten to your last page of notes, you draw the final line that's maybe 1/3 up from the bottom of the page. That's your summarize line. That's where you're literally doing a W2T, or writing to think, where you're literally brainstorming about different ways you can apply the concept that you learned from the lecture video. So WISC stands for watch, summarize, question. First you watch, then you question. When you're done, you summarize. Now, what are some key things to look for in a lecture video? First thing to automatically look for are the VIPs. The VIPs are the very important points. Whereas if I literally wanted to recap the lecture in 3 minutes or less, I'd probably do that using VIPs. Now, typically in a lecture video, you're going to have the main points that are literally spelled out for you. Now, underneath them, you're going to have explanations or definitions. And they're typically going to be numbered, or they're going to be bulleted. So, and typically the main point will be in one color ink, and the bulleted or numbered list will be in a different color ink. So it'll always be something that you can easily differentiate from. The next thing that are typically in red are the examples. Lecture videos also come with a lot of modeling actually in the lecture video. It actually comes with actual examples that you can learn from as well. And they're always in red. The next thing that are typically found in lecture videos are acronyms. For example, when you're learning about how to combine sentences, there is an acronym to remember the 7 coordinating conjunctions. It's called FANBOYS. For and nor, but, or, yet, and so. Remember the word FANBOYS, you'll never forget the 7 coordinated conjunctions or the words you need to combine 2 complete sentences. Lastly, the most important thing, almost as important as the VIPs, is to pay attention to what you are hearing. It's not enough just to look at the lecture video, look at what's on the whiteboards, and copy everything down. You literally have to listen to what the teacher is saying, because sometimes the teacher is going to give you information that's not on the board, but it's just as equally important. So, the next day in class, it's all about this word right here, mastery. And in order to achieve mastery, it requires that you, one, have done the back work, you've done the leg work, you've watched the lecture video. So mastery also has a tinge of you being accountable and responsible for doing the work, and that you participate in class. Now, there are 3 steps to mastery. We have first the 3-minute recap. That's where I reteach, you ask, I answer. So in 3 minutes, I'm going to reteach the skill where I may go over the VIPs. I may go over an example. And in 3 minutes, you have those 3 minutes to ask me any questions that you came up with, and then I will answer them. So if I don't have a lot of questions, I'll keep going with my 3 minutes until my 3 minutes are up. And then we are done with the 3-minute recap. After the 3-minute recap, we're going to do I, we, us, you. That's where we're going one step further towards mastery. So, right about here, we're in the remembering and defining stage. Here, we're going to be in the analyzing stage of towards mastery. So, the I is where I do it. That's where I'm up at the board, I'm doing the problems, I'm doing the work. All you're doing is watching me do it. You're watching me do it, and as you watch me do it, you're adding to your lecture notes. You're adding the processes. You're trying to figure out, think, and brainstorm ways that you can do it yourself, because I'm showing you my method. That's the way I've figured out, that's the way I've made it work for me. But as you watch the lecture videos and you watch me model, watch me do it, you may have your own process, and that's perfectly okay. I welcome that. There's more than one way to write a sentence. There's more than one way to write a paragraph. There's more than one way to have a complete thought. So, after we do that, then we're going to do another W2T, where you literally take what we learned in the 3-minute recap, take what you learned in the I, and you try to connect it and figure out how you can make this concept work for you. How can you take this concept that I just taught you and apply it? So, it's not enough just to say you know what a noun is. Can you apply it in your writing? It's not enough to say you know how to use focus in your writing. I want to see you apply it. Once we're done with that, we're going to move to the we part. The we is where we do it as a class, where we have another problem on the board, and we as a class are going to try to do it together. It could be if we're talking about the rules of capitalization, where we are literally looking at sentences and we are fixing them. It could be where we are annotating a text and we have it up on the board, and then I literally am annotating what you feel is important. So that's the we stage. That stage is not long. That stage is just to make sure we are where we need to be. Now, at this point right here, even though it's not written, this point right here, we're going to assess where we are. So you're either going to be where you're ready to go to the next step. That's called a level up, or a green level up. You really may need a boost me. That's yellow, where you not ready to really go at it alone. You still need some help. So that's a yellow triangle. Then last we have the help me card. That's a red card, where you either didn't watch the lecture video or you're totally lost on how to do it. So you literally will assess yourself. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, assess. You'll grab the card, that's your color, and then we'll assess the room. So there'll be some greens, there'll be some yellows, and there'll be some reds. Now don't get discouraged if we're doing multiple different lecture videos and concepts and you're constantly a red or you're constantly a yellow. Eventually you'll find the concept where you're a green, or you're always a green. You might come across a concept where you're a red, and that's okay. So once we've done that and we assess ourselves, we'll then break up into Collabo groups based on where we are with the concept, based on the lecture video topic. So we'll do Collabo. And the Collabo has 4 specific groups, 4 specific roles: facilitator, timekeeper, scribe, and presenter. Now, in the Collabo, you're going to be given a task. For the level up, it could be to formulate something, or create something, or create your own mini lecture video or 3 recap video if you're a green. If you're yellow, it could be more problem solving, where I'm sitting with you or I'm standing there trying to give you another way to think about it or another way to look at it. Or it could be red, where you're in the back with your headphones, you're rewatching the lecture video, or you're doing more problem solving, or working more problems out. Lastly, once we're done with the Collabos, it's going to be you, where I'm giving you a task. Now that we may have time in class to do the task. The task is always individually by yourself. It may be a short task, it may be a long task, but it is where you have one final chance working one-on-one with me to figure out if you mastered this concept. And then the third step towards mastery is assessment. Typically, assessments are going to be on Kia, and they're ELC style question based. So I literally want to see, do you have the skills? Have you really learned and mastered the concepts? Are you ready to apply it? Have you learned the knowledge, and are you ready now to apply the knowledge? So the next day when we're doing mastery, we could do mastery one of 2 ways. We could do it in Collabos, or we could do it in Paideia. Now, in the Collabos, we do Collabos a lot in this class. So by the time the semester ends, you'll be totally used to Collabos, and you'll be totally used to the 4 roles. The first role is facilitator. I like to think of the facilitator as the supervisor. They're the one that gets the plan from the main facilitator, i.e. the teacher. And then they figure out a plan to be successful. So every Collabo group is given a task. It is the facilitator's job to figure out how to execute the task. So they want to make sure that they are keeping everyone on task. If Johnny Sue or Sally Shucks is not on task, it's up to the facilitator to make sure that they get back on task. Remember, the facilitator still participates. Regardless of your role, you still participate. You don't just sit back and watch everyone do the work. Keyword in Collabos is participation. The next role is the timekeeper. You keep the time. The main facilitator is always going to tell you how much time you're allotted for your task. Then it's your job to make sure you keep up with the time. Now, sometimes the teacher will have the time on the board. Sometimes they won't, where it's your job to take out your timepiece to keep and monitor the time. You always let the facilitator know how much time is left. If you feel the facilitator is spending too much time on a specific point of a specific part of the task, then it's your job to get the facilitator back on time. You are pretty much the facilitator's conscience. You're her or his guide. After that, you have the scribe. The scribe is literally the Collabo secretary. They take notes on everything. If everyone did something individually at the beginning, and then you break into your groups and you have to share, it's the scribe's job to take notes on what everybody shared. If you are going to be presenting at a board meeting, that's where we bring all the boards together, then it's the scribe's job to write out the information on the board. So that's the scribe's job, literally. Last but not least, you have the presenter. The presenter is the only person in the group that can speak to the main facilitator, i.e. your teacher. The main facilitator, i.e. your teacher, will audibly give the directions to everybody in the room, but the main facilitator is only speaking to the presenter. Once the main facilitator is done giving the instructions, done giving the task, then it's up to the presenter to give those instructions to the facilitator, and then the facilitator will go to work. When we come back together as a class for our board meetings, it is the presenter's job to present the information to the entire classroom. Those are the 4 rows. Lastly, we have Paideias, which I like to think of as the hold nothing back academic truth sessions. We typically do Paideias when we are reading current event articles. We do Paideias for any and everything that we read. It's literally a forum where you can sound off on what we read. If you hated it, say you hated it. If you loved it, say you loved it and defend it. If you hated it, definitely say you hated it, but be able to defend it with evidence, i.e. elaboration. So, once again, Paideia seminars will be used for shorts. That's what I like to think of, short stories, novels, poems, films or film clips, current events, and maybe even brainstorming for projects. It'll sometimes be used for lecture videos, but typically not. It's typically reserved for everything that we read. Now, in that one, you'll only probably have 3 roles. You'll have the facilitator. Their role is still the same, except the facilitator also has a list of questions that they have to ask the group as a whole. So they essentially moderate the conversation. As a facilitator in a Paideia group, you never call on anybody. In a Paideia group, it's the student participant's responsibility to speak. Paideias are graded. They're counted as a quiz grade. So if you don't speak, you're not getting credit. The scribe literally takes the notes of the Paideia. They moderate and monitor who speaks, how many times they speak, and how they speak. They also moderate and observe how the conversation is going. What topics come up in the conversation? What main themes come up in the conversation? What main questions were the most popular? So that's what the scribe's duty is. And then lastly, you have the timekeeper. If I give you 20 minutes for Paideia, it's the timekeeper's job to keep the facilitator on task.